Today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. We are interviewing Herbert Safran in the United States in Decatur, Georgia. Today is Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. We're interviewing Herbert Safran in the United States in Decatur, Georgia. Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
So can you share your name with us today, and can you spell it?
First name Herbert, Herbert. Second name Safran, Safran.
Right. And is that what your mother called you? Did your mother call you any other name?
My mother hasn't called me in many a year, so I don't remember.
Okay. And when were you born?
March 28, 1933,
And where were you born?
Vienna, Austria.
Okay. And what was your first language that you remember?
German.
Right. And do you speak any other languages?
Italian, because I go there so often. French, because I used to go there. Spanish I took in high school. Latin I took in high school. That's about it.
No, it's very impressive. So we're going to talk a little bit about your family first, your parents and then grandparents. So what was your father's birth name?
May 19th, 1899.
And what was he called? What was his name?
Max.
And what kind of family environment? Were they Jewish, observant, not? What do you know about his family background?
Very little. They were not observant. I think they got married in a synagogue, but I wasn't there. And that about covers it.
And where was he born?
Vienna, Austria.
So did his family, your grandparents, his parents also live in Vienna?
My grandfather did. My father's father lived in Vienna, where he died in 1940 of natural causes. And in my mother's family, there were a lot of deaths from the flu epidemic, 1920, 21, 22. And I never met any of her parents. I did meet her sister, who at some time lived in Montevideo, Uruguay. And I didn't meet any other of my mother's relatives. My father had a brother whom we brought to the United States, and he had a wife and a brother-in-law, but no natural children. And he lived in Atlanta too.
So your father was from Vienna, your grandparents were from Vienna. How many generations?
Wait.
Your father was born in Vienna?
Yes, my grandmother came from, I had the thing posted, Trebic, Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
And she emigrated to Vienna because Vienna was the capital, and the Austrians owned Czechoslovakia at that time in the 1800s, 1890, whatever. And that's how she got to Vienna. My grandfather, I don't know, he died in 1940. We didn't speak much because I was 7, and he didn't he didn't feel it worthwhile to talk to grandchildren.
So it sounds like your father's, part of your father's family had been long time part of society there, many generations in Vienna.
No, I wouldn't call it many generations. My grandmother emigrated from what was Czechoslovakia, which changed its name several times. And my grandfather, my father's father, I just don't remember, and he did die in 1940 of natural causes, and we never spoke. I was 7 when he died.
So do you know if were your grandparents observant or not? Do you know if that
Not.
was... Okay. And do you know if your father, did he ever say he got bar mitzvahed, and do you know if he ever did that?
We never discussed it.
Okay. So, so that is your father, and do you remember your father's parents, your grandparents?
Yes. The last time I saw them was 1939.
Do you have any particular memory about them at all?
They were old people.
Did you go there for dinners, or did you?
I don't recall much social interaction with them. They lived nearby in Vienna, and I feel they didn't have much use for me, probably due to my mother. So we didn't have a lot of family gatherings with them.
So let's talk about your father's siblings. How many did he have?
2.
And who were they?
His brother Arthur, who preceded us to Atlanta. We made arrangements for him to come to the United States because we were able to do that. And my father had a sister, Grete, who married a Romanian and couldn't get out and didn't feel like they had to get out. And we had arranged for their son to go to Cuba, and they refused to send him, saying Cuba was too hot. This was in the fall of 41. We had arranged for him to come to Cuba. They didn't know, so they all died. And you have the record because it's that name of that camp in Romania where they were killed.
So we'll talk a little bit more about how you helped your family come. So for your father's side, your grandfather died of natural causes, and your grandmother?
Died in, I want to say Trebich, which was a Nazi-planned community in Czechoslovakia, and I had the certificate hanging here, but we took it down. The town's name was Trebich, which is now Trebice in the Czech language, and she may have died of natural causes, I don't know, in 42.
And then your uncle Arthur survived
Yes.
also?
We brought them all over to the United States because we were here first and we could provide the necessary financial guarantees. He was in Sweden when the war started. He had a job there. And once we arranged for him to come here and got the visa forms, he took the train to Moscow, and then there's a Trans-Siberian Railway which he could get on, and they all went to Vladivostok, and then they took a ferry boat and they went to Yokohama and dealt with the American consul in Yokohama, who told them there's going to be a war, get out. So they took the first ship and they came, let's say, they came to Seattle in the summer of 41.
Okay. So let's talk about your family's journey, and then we'll come back to your mom's side.
Okay?
So you're born in 1933,
Correct.
and and your family left in what year?
39.
So you went to school or different parts between 33 and 39? Do you remember going to school
No
there at
school.
all? No school?
Once the Nazis took over, Jewish children were not allowed to go to school, and I was one of those, so I didn't go.
And so you were born in March and the Nazis invaded in,
What country are we
we're
talking about?
talking about Austria?
They came like March 12th, 1938. I'll put in a little story. A plebiscite was called for Sunday, March 13th, 1938, to see if the Austrians wanted to join the Germans. And Hitler was afraid that he would lose that vote, so he had his troops march in the night before. So there was Sunday morning, and the Nazis were in full occupation of Austria, and especially Vienna, the capital. And things changed rapidly for the Jews thereafter. My father was fired the next day from his job and never worked again in Austria. And my mother was not working anyway.
Do you remember seeing things change? Do you remember seeing the flags come up or German soldiers on the street at that young age?
I saw the flags because my father told me to look at the flags and remember. I didn't see German soldiers. We went out that Sunday morning and saw the flags and whatever. That was 1938, so I was 5, not given to a lot of recognition of what's happening, but my father told me, remember this day, and I still do. It was like March 14th, 1938.
What was it like when your father got fired and came home? What did you and your mother and all three of you do?
They had savings, and they didn't discuss important matters in front of me. I was 5, so when they wanted to hide things from me, they spoke English because the two of them had enough English to do that. And I can remember one big subject was Wallace Simpson and the goings-on with King, whatever his name was, her husband. That was a big topic of conversation, so I heard that and I was impressed by it. That would have been in 36, 37, and I was born in 33, so I was 3-4 years old. And I remember my mother trying to say Mrs. Simpson, which is hard for an Austrian to say. I remember that, and not much else.
What kind of meals did you have, or how did you get food before or after the invasion of Hitler?
Well, before it was no problem. My grandparents had a store, so they could get stuff.
What kind of store did they have?
It was a liquor store, but because they were merchants, they could deal in food and other products.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no problem getting food on the table. I don't remember there was a problem. There was always stuff there, and I should back up. We were in a fortunate position. My father was an officer in the Austrian army in World War I, rank of lieutenant, and I think he had contacts because the war ended in 1918 and Hitler marched in 1938, so it wasn't that long before, and he had his contacts, and of course they didn't talk about it. But thinking back on it, we used those contacts, but they didn't discuss them in front of me. That's how we got out. The Austrians were, I wouldn't say eager, but they let us get out once we had all the visas to travel to the United States, and we started our trip.
So here you are in your house, your father gets fired. Were you at some point told to leave your home and you moved, or did you leave and live somewhere else temporarily before you left the country?
Yes, we sold the apartment, and the Nazi who took it over actually paid. He didn't pay a lot, but he paid whatever. And I was 5 years old. What did I know anyway? And I think we moved in with my grandparents for 6, 9, 12 months until we could get out of the country.
So I know you don't know directly, but how did your parents just try to get out? Who did they work with to get visas and contacts? Can you
My
share
mother's
that?
cousin lived in Brooklyn at the time,
And what was your mother's name?
Irma. She was a kind of a distant cousin, and she found somebody who would give the financial guarantee, an American citizen. And with that financial guarantee, we were given visas to A, go to Belgium, and B, go to England, and C, go to the United States. And we had immigrant number, and the immigrant number is still in the passport, and I still have the passport from 1938.
So I know we haven't talked yet about your mother's family, but was your mother's parents still alive when?
No, a lot of them died. There was a flu epidemic in 1921, and my mother's sister survived, but the rest of them didn't, or if they did, they had nothing to do with me, so I don't know
No.
about them. They
So,
certainly were not alive when we came to the United States, because we would have brought them over.
right. And then what about your father's mother? Did he try to also get a visa for her?
She stayed, and I have the document where she was shipped to Trebich in 42, maybe March, whatever. And I think she died there of natural causes, by which time her husband had already died from natural causes. And my father's brother was already in Sweden in 1936.
So through your mother's connection,
Yes,
you
her
were
cousin.
able to get these visas. How long was it from the time of, the invasion to the time you could leave? Was it 2 months? Was it a year? How long were you?
14 months.
And do you remember what you did those 14 months? Did you
I
play
was
outside?
a kid. I was
Did they
5, and
teach you at home, or?
they might have. They spoke English to one another, especially when they didn't want me to know what they were talking about. And I did not go to school because I wasn't allowed to go to school. And we kind of just survived. I don't remember anything exceptional, except that we had to move because we sold the apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And the Nazi who bought the apartment actually paid for it.
So here you are at your grandparents living there. These visas come through. What did your parents tell you? It's time to move, time to leave. What did they say to you at that moment?
Well, I was 6. I didn't know about the world and politics, and they might have said, we're going to go to England. I don't know what they said.
Did they tell you to pack, and did you remember packing and saying goodbye to your grandmother? And
I don't remember any of that. I do remember a lot of stuff lying on the floor that we didn't take when we moved out of our apartment. And I was 6 when we left Vienna.
do you know if, how did you travel from Vienna to eventually get to London? Can you tell us that journey?
Exactly, I can tell it. Vienna was a big place where a lot of trains went. It was a terminus, and we took a train from Vienna to the Belgian border, whatever the name of the town was, but it's where Germany ended and Belgium started. And I remember the train stopped and we all got out and showed our papers. And we had the correct papers, so the Belgians would let us continue. Maybe on that train or the next train, which went to the port of Ostend. And we got a ferry boat to Dover. I think it's a 2-hour trip, something like that. Then we took a train to London where we had a place to live.
So before you go to London, did anybody help you along the way? Did you pack food? How long did that journey take to get to the port?
Well, it was from Vienna to the Belgian border. It's a day trip. And then the train from the border, whose name of the town I don't remember, but Belgium is not so big, so we took the train from that spot to Ostend, which is a channel port, and took the ferry boat to Dover, and took a train from Dover to London, and we had a place to stay in London.
Who helped you in London when you got there? Like, who helped you settle?
I don't know. My father could make arrangements because people were doing all kinds of things, and there were people who provided apartments and people who transferred funds so they wouldn't go through the banking system. And I was not party to any of that, but my father was worldly wise, and he knew, and my mother knew too. So no money had to cross borders because of the controls, but money would be deposited in Vienna and would show up in London, because there were people who also did the reverse. Money would leave London and show up in Vienna, because this was, I'm trying to think, May 39, war hadn't started yet, but there was a lot of financial transactions going on, as you can imagine.
And at this point in 1939, England is not in the war yet.
England declared war around September 4th, 1939, when the Germans invaded Poland, because they had an agreement, and the French too, and they both declared war on Germany.
So you arrived in London in May
Correct.
of 39,
Correct.
and somebody met you and took you to an apartment, or your father had arranged it, and then do you remember staying in London, and then what happened next in London?
I started school, let's say September 1st. Then the war started September 4th, and then they started evacuating all London school children, including me. And they stupidly sent me to Worthing on the south coast, where I lived with the family of a street sweeper. And he had 2 evacuee children, and of course he got money for that, maybe something like 1 or 2 pounds a week of money. And I stayed there 4 months. And of course the school was only in English, so I got to learn English in a hurry. When we went to church on Sunday, there was no synagogue in that town of Worthing.
Was the other evacuee also an immigrant, or were they native to
There was a kid,
London?
I don't know his background. The profession of the father was a street sweeper, and he had 2 or 3 children of his own, and he took in 2 evacuee children.
Do you remember being in that household? Where were your parents when you were evacuated?
They were not allowed to travel because they were enemy aliens, but they weren't concerned about me because I was 6. My father was allowed to visit me 1 time in 4 months, and my mother was not allowed. She had a different status. I don't know all that stuff. Anyway, he came 1 time on a Sunday afternoon, and then the time came for us to go to, well, the war had started, of course, like September 4th. And then they came and got me, and we went to Liverpool and got on the ship.
So, do you have any other memories from living with this Worthing family, church and school?
Yes. The child who behaved best got to eat Kellogg's cornflakes. That was the treat. Otherwise, they might have had porridge or oatmeal or whatever. But I remember they called it Kellogg's, and that was the treat for well-behaved children.
And were you able to write to your parents while you lived there? I mean, you were young. Did somebody write letters for you, or?
I don't recall any of that.
So how did you learn that? Did your parents come and get you?
Yes,
or were
they
you
came
sent?
and somebody had to come and get me because I wouldn't have gotten to Liverpool by myself. Maybe they both came, maybe my father came, whatever. Anyway, we got to Liverpool, and I remember going up the gangplank of this ship. Trying to remember the name. Whatever, you have it in your records, it'll come to me. Newfoundland, SS Newfoundland. Going up the gangplank, I still had my child gas mask, and they said, you have to give it up and leave it here. And I started to cry, and it was a big scene because they had told me, don't ever let go of your gas mask. Keep it with you all the time, and I'm obedient. So when they told me I had to give it up, I was very upset, but I gave it up. We got on the ship, and the next day the ship sailed to the United States in convoy.
So this gas mask, when did you get that? When you got to England or when you were evacuated?
I think it was part of going to school and the war starting, which would have been September, whatever.
Did you have even though you were very young, because you were with other children that were evacuated, did you have a sense that war was going on or fighting or?
There was no fighting. The British and French declared war on the Germans when the Germans invaded Poland. And what did the British and French do? They sat in the Maginot Line, and eventually the Germans decided to attack around the end of the Maginot Line, where there were no fortifications in Belgium, and the French were so stupid to have left a gap in the Maginot Line. But they learned their lesson. Mm-hmm. The Germans got through in a week. This was in 41, well, whenever they did it, it's in the record books.
So when your parents left Vienna with you and then you had your journey to London, do you know if they took anything that was very special to them that they wanted to keep, or some memento of their?
They had a huge steamer trunk full of stuff, and whatever was in there, I didn't know. It could have been in storage, and we never opened it, and shipped it from Liverpool to Boston on that ship. And I wasn't aware of what was in the big trunk or not.
Mm-hmm. And do you know if along the way, like when you had to get off the train at the border, did they search you? Did they ask you questions? Were you told, what? Do you remember anything of that moment?
They didn't ask me anything. I was 6. They weren't interested in a 6-year-old. Mm-hmm. This was May 1939, and my parents may have answered a few questions. We had a passport which identified us as Jewish, so what were we going to talk about? The Germans didn't care if we left. And
do you know, I mean, I know you didn't handle it, but do you know if they were restricted to money? Did they ask for anything like that?
Don't know anything, and I was not quizzed. After all, I was 6, although I did speak German. Nobody asked me anything.
Right. So when your parents are in London and you're in the country,
Right.
How did your parents survive? Did they work? How did they get food? Do you know?
I wasn't there. Um, I think they had been able to transfer money to England because there was a lot of that going on. People who made it their business to transfer money between Austria and England and between England and Austria. There's a big market for that stuff. And I wasn't there. I left like first week of September '39, and I saw my father one afternoon, that's it. And then I don't know, I didn't pay attention to what they were doing. I was 6.
So while we're still in Europe, before you come to the U.S., your family makes it to England. Your
Right.
father's brother makes it to Russia and eventually to the
Right.
United States. Your aunt
Goes to Montevideo.
was murdered with her husband and child.
Didn't have a child. That was her first husband, and she got divorced and married another guy. And we only saw her one time in all those years because people didn't travel like they do now.
So now let's talk about your mother's side. We said you're originally from Czechoslovakia.
She was born in Austria, and a lot of her family died in the flu epidemic,
Right.
1921-22. And I think
How many siblings did she have?
2 that I
And-
know of.
And what happened to them during
Well,
these
the
war
one went
years?
to Montevideo. The other one died in the flu epidemic, I think.
When you say Montevideo, you mean
The capital of Uruguay.
Uruguay? Okay.
Things then weren't like they are now, like people calling up back and forth and a lot of letter writing. It just didn't happen
Right.
because it was wartime.
So of the whole family, really the 3 of you and your uncle and this aunt, what was your aunt's name that went to Paraguay? Yeah, I mean Uruguay. Do you remember?
Oh, it's going to come to me. Lily,
Lily.
yeah.
So that's what the family survived, and everyone else either died naturally or were murdered by the Nazis.
She went to Uruguay with her first husband, and they got divorced, and then she married this other guy, and that's all I know.
Right. So, I don't recall. Do any of your relatives ever make it to Israel or Palestine or?
Well, there was no Israel, so they couldn't make it. Israel only started in 1948, by which time we were all settled wherever.
Okay.
I went a few times.
I just didn't know if there might be a long lost cousin that might have gone to Palestine.
The British didn't let them in. I don't know that they wanted to go there at that time, like 37, 38, 39. I don't recall any big movement to Israel. I do recall my cousin, he shopped around to where he could get the cheapest tourist visa, and he found Tanganyika.
Which cousin is this? Who is that related to? Which aunt or uncle?
My father's relative's son, he was like 20, and
Is this not Arthur's? Your
no,
uncle?
no, was, I don't know. But the thing about Tanganyika stood in my mind because he shopped around for an immigrant visa, and for $30, Tanganyika would sell him one, and he took it and went to Tanganyika and spent the war there, eventually ending up in Canada.
So here you are leaving your birthplace,
Yes.
traveling all the way to England to live with a family you didn't know before you came to the United States. What do you think when you think back on that period of your life? Or
I had to learn English in a hurry because nobody spoke German in England that I encountered. and I went to elementary school.
Did you have to, were you told to hide your Judaism, or did they know you were Jewish? What was,
I don't know what they knew.
were you told not to say you were Jewish at
I
all?
wasn't told anything.
Okay. So let's just get your mother's name and her information. What was your mother's name?
Irma,
Can you spell that for me?
IRMA,
And when was she born? Do you know?
03.
1903?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And do you remember family meals before the war? Did she have any favorite foods of yours that you liked, or?
I don't recall any family interactions.
It's okay.
There wasn't much going on.
Okay.
People had other worries at that time, other than socializing.
So here you are now. Your family has regrouped in December 1939, and you're getting ready to go in this boat.
We didn't regroup.
They came and got you.
Right, and we went to Liverpool
Right.
and got on this ship, which you already have a record of. USS Newfoundland. I think it was Canadian flag.
Yeah. Do you remember being on the boat, and how
Oh,
long did
yes.
the trip take? What was it like being on the boat?
We were in a convoy for 3 days, and they felt that was long enough to bring us beyond the U-boat range because the Germans hadn't conquered France yet and didn't have those U-boat bases.
Can you explain what you mean by a convoy?
Yes, all the ships had to go at the speed of the slowest ship, and it became a large unit, and there may have been some Royal Navy, call them corvettes, which is a small destroyer, and so they were kind of guarding us. We only stayed in convoy 3 days, and then the ships broke apart, and those that could go faster did so, and those that couldn't stayed behind. And they felt that after 3 days, the problem was past because it was December 39, and the Germans didn't venture so far out in the Atlantic.
And what was it like on the boat? What was the room
Cold.
like? And
It was cold, and the ship rocked in the waves. The waves were pretty strong. And there were some Australians going home, and we socialized with them. So they got to Australia, joined the army, because they wanted to join the Australian army. And the next we hear from them is they're in the German prison camp, because they were sent all the way back to maybe North Africa, and they were captured. Very few passengers. It was mainly a cargo ship, and they had a few cabins on board.
so it wasn't like a big immigration ship of all these refugees leaving?
No, there were very few people on board. And you have the bill of lading anyway, so they were all listed there.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up in Boston.
So you get to Boston, and do you remember getting off the ship and who was there to help you?
Yes, the Jewish agency was there to help us, and they put us up in Cambridge for 3 days. And then they suggested that we go to New Bedford, which was nearby. And my parents became butler and maid, which
Do you
was
remember who you worked for, your parents stayed and worked for?
Mutter Pearl, Mutterperl. He was a manufacturer of handbags in New Bedford.
And so what was it like living there for that short period?
I met my first black person. I was shocked to meet this person because there weren't any blacks in Austria or in England, and all of a sudden this black person appears. And I remember how strange it was. And eventually they left me in New Bedford because I was going to school. And they went to New York, and I stayed in New Bedford with another family that had no children. And eventually we all went to Pittsburgh in the fall. That would have been, I don't know, fall of 41.
So how long did you live with these two different families in New Bedford? For how many years?
The first one, 4 months. The second one, they sent me to a summer camp that they controlled. So I didn't stay with them very much. And I kind of don't remember all the details of when and where and who. I remember their name and their street address, but that's about it. And he was a judge. He was a Republican judge, and I was really impressed because he owned a Packard coupe, and I thought, gee, this is really something. I was impressed by that. His brother lived next door. The street was called Roach, R-O-T-C-H, and he either lived at 91 or 93, and the brother either lived at 93 or 91. And I went to school in New Bedford. Oh, yes. I went to school. My parents took me to enroll me in school, and I had a British accent, and they thought, gee, this kid is really smart. He's got this British accent. So instead of putting me in first grade where I belonged, they put me in second grade and screwed up my entire elementary school career because I was always the youngest in the class.
Were these families you with Jewish or not Jewish? Not that it matters.
The place where I stayed, they were Jewish.
Both of them. Did
Yes.
they take you to? Did they do any Jewish customs or
Oh
practices?
yeah, we had Friday night, and they may have taken me to synagogue and other synagogue functions.
Did you enjoy it? Did you?
I didn't form an opinion. We just went.
So here you are. Then your parents leave to go to
New York.
to find other income, jobs, or
We didn't discuss it. They just went, and I stayed with this family in New Bedford because I had already started school. So I stayed in New Bedford, and then in the fall, we all went to Pittsburgh because the Jewish Agency said there's going to be a war. Pittsburgh is going to boom with all the steel mills and coal. That's where you should go.
so that's 1941, and you're 8 years old by then, 8 or 9.
I don't know. Pearl Harbor happened when we were in Pittsburgh. So this was before.
Okay.
Maybe it was the fall of 1940 that we went to Pittsburgh.
So what was Pittsburgh like? Did a Jewish agency place you, or by then your father found a place to live?
I don't know of all that because I was not involved. And he was a Fuller Brush man for a while. They don't exist anymore. They go from door to door with sample brushes, and people buy or not buy. Eventually he found a job in the insurance industry, and after a few years that company was put out of business because they had mishandled policyholder funds, and I knew all about that because I was interested. And eventually we went to New York, and in Pittsburgh I went to Osceola. I had trouble with the name, but it's an Indian chief. Garfield was a president. Fulton was an inventor, and Rogers, I don't know, but I went to 4 elementary schools in Pittsburgh and graduated, and then went to high school, Peabody.
So here you are, your family moves to Pittsburgh, the war breaks out. Do you remember if your parents tried to contact their family members in Europe or tried to help them? You talked about your Uncle Arthur. How did that happen? How did you all end up helping him come to the United States?
Well, he wasn't he was either in Sweden or on his way, and the rest of them, there was no contact.
Okay.
Sweden was neutral.
So how did you mentioned you helped your uncle come to the United States, your family did. When did he come and how did they help?
They came in 41 on a Japanese ship to Seattle. The war hadn't started. And they both found jobs.
And did your family sponsor them, or did this
Yes,
other person did?
We provided the wherewithal to get them into the country, whatever it took.
Right.
It wasn't much. I remember seeing a document, all it took was $1,000 a person to get the visa.
Do you remember when you saw your uncle for the first time again since Europe?
Well, they went from Seattle to Atlanta without stopping in Pittsburgh. He did visit several years later Pittsburgh, and I didn't see him in Europe because he went to Sweden in 1936 and I was 3 years old.
Mm-hmm. So it was your father reconnecting with his brother, and his brother, your uncle, meeting you really again since a young age.
Right. He came to Pittsburgh once to try to borrow money from my father and was not successful. And of course, I wasn't in on the discussion either.
Mm-hmm. So you have your family, you went to Pittsburgh, started schooling there. The war starts.
Yes.
Did you have a sense of what was going on in the world and how your family was able to get out, and how did that make you feel?
Well, war started for the United States with Pearl Harbor in 1941, and I was 8 and not really in tune with the international situation. I knew that a war had started, but when you're in Pittsburgh, Hawaii is very far away, mm-hmm. and the Japanese did not attack mainland U.S. ever in the war. And the Germans didn't either. It's interesting to me, my father and uncle were not drafted, I guess because they were too old and also because they were enemy aliens.
Do you remember when you became a citizen, you and your family?
Yes, 1945. I have the document. It's called derivative because when my parents became citizens, I got a derivative citizenship document.
Did you go to a ceremony with them, and do you remember any of that?
I doubt it, that there was a ceremony. It was wartime.
So you're in school, it's World War II. Do you know, did your parents as aliens have to register every year or register you? Do you remember any of that?
If they did, I don't remember. I was not involved and I didn't have to go register.
Right. So when did you, so you were in Pittsburgh, and
Yes.
when did your family, what year did they decide to move to New York, you said?
Yeah, maybe 46, 47. My father got a job in New York because the insurance business, there was a lot more of it in New York than Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, there was one Jewish insurance company which was forced out of business. But in New York, there were lots of insurance activities, and he got a job right away. Then we moved to New York.
Did he try to only work for Jewish companies, or would Jewish companies are the only ones that would hire him? Do you know?
We didn't discuss such things.
Did you belong, not that you had to, but did you belong to in Pittsburgh Jewish communities? Or?
Yeah, B'nai Israel Synagogue, which was almost within walking distance, and I was bar mitzvahed there too.
In Pittsburgh?
Yeah, B'nai Israel Synagogue, which may still exist.
So that was in 46.
Yes.
Do you remember your bar mitzvah?
Yes, they held me back so I could perform at the rabbi's or cantor's 25th anniversary, because I wondered why wasn't I bar mitzvahed around my birthday? And then we discovered I was held back because I could do certain things that the other kids couldn't. And so it was May 46.
So you moved to New York in 1946. You are then...
More or less.
So at what age did you become aware of how your parents escaped and what it really meant in the world of their survivor, that they survived the war if they had not gotten out? When did that become a reality for you?
I'd been through a lot, and we had to move a lot. My father had to change jobs a lot. And I don't recall anything about it, except we did a lot of moving, and I did a lot of school changing because of the move. You had to live near a school.
So when did you learn about World War II and the Holocaust in school? And
Well, it was big news in December 1941, and the Jews were not involved in December 41.
but after the war, when you were in high school?
I'm 45. I was 12. The news came slowly. It was not like it is today, where you get the news within 5 minutes. It took weeks for them to discover the camps and for people to analyze what went on in the camps. It happened very slowly.
Do you look back and with the wherewithal your parents had to get out and what it took for them to persevere to save all of you?
It isn't all of me. They only had one child.
Well, the three of you.
There was not a lot of discussion because such things were best spoken of privately. And I guess they didn't want to talk in front of me because they didn't. And I have no answer for that, how it was achieved.
But how you feel personally that they were able to accomplish that?
Because my father was an officer in the Austrian Army in World War I, and I think this gave him, he certainly had connections in Austria to his old army buddies, and this one knows that one and knows that that one controls that. And he had plenty of time because he was fired the day after Hitler marched in, so they had plenty of time to make these contacts. And then when my distant cousin came through with the visa documents, we could just leave.
So here you left the country, Massachusetts, Pittsburgh, New York, and I'll talk more after New York. Did you ever experience any anti-Semitism, or did you experience anything in the school, or do you have any memories of any of that while you were growing up?
No. Well, it was wartime. I think people had other things on their mind than anti-Semitism.
Were there, so now you're in New York and you go to high school there and graduate.
I go to high school there, then we move, then I go to another high school from which I graduate. So it upsets friendships because I went to 3 high schools, and that is not a way to live.
Right. And then from high school, what did you do next?
I was admitted to Cooper Union, which is one of the few free private schools in the country. in civil engineering, and 4 years later I graduated. And before I graduated, I volunteered for the U.S. Army.
And let's talk about what year did you graduate?
54.
So in 54, just to get a sense of the world, there was, Korea War was over? Or a little
Troops were
bit?
still being sent to Korea, but not in large numbers.
Okay.
And Vietnam hadn't even started yet.
Right. So what made you decide then to join the Army? Would you have been drafted or did you elect to join?
I elected to join as a draftee, which meant I only had to serve 2 years. And my friend and I went together, and on the third day in the Army, he said, "Paul, let's go take the German exam." And I said, I don't want to
Or
take it.
Herbert, right? Yeah.
Yes, you're right. It's Herbert. Let's take the German exam. And I passed with a minimum passing score, and he had come from Germany more recently, and he got an excellent score, but in his case, he couldn't get secret clearance, and I could.
So let's just back up. So you took
Okay.
this exam
Right.
just to take it or for the purpose of being admitted to this special unit?
No, I didn't know what the future would hold. He said it was the third day in the Army, and certain tests were given on that date, one which was the language exam. He said, "Paul, let's go take the language exam." And I said, "Okay." I hadn't done any German anything for years, but I had enough left to pass, so that made my career. I didn't study ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Stop. So you take this German test and you
Pass.
pass. So what happened next? Did you get to pick what areas you wanted to work in the Army, or
No, you don't pick. I was a private, and they pick.
okay?
And they sent me, well, everybody goes through basic training, which is 8 weeks, with guns and grenade and this and that. Then they sent me to clerk typist school because people who were going into this line of work needed to type. And I barely passed the clerk typist school. In the meantime, the FBI started investigating me because my friend said so. And I tended furnaces. It was winter time because somebody needed to keep the coal in the furnace. And eventually the FBI cleared me and I got on a ship and was sent to Germany.
So in Germany, here you're back. Well, you were in Vienna, but now you're going to Germany.
Right.
And did it feel strange to go back to?
Well, I
that
had never lived in Germany, and I was in the Army, so I lived in barracks, and I had a uniform. We had Army vehicles.
So now you speak German again more. You use your language as a
Right.
profession in your Army life. So you're in Europe. How old are you now?
21.
Did you then go back to Vienna or other places to see where you lived?
I can tell you the story. There's this place, it was called Reppel Deppel, which is short for Replacement Depot, and I went there, and they decided to send me to the military intelligence headquarters, which was 100 miles away. And I show up there, and they say hi, and I start taking German classes. And one day they said, the head of the Berlin office is coming to interview potential workers. I mean, we were all privates, so I was a potential worker. I was a draftee. And I took one look at him, and he took one look at me. He was from Vienna. I was from Vienna. I had the job. What did he care? I was a private. He wasn't paying me anyway. And I was shipped off to Berlin to work in this operation. We were like 6 or 8 people, and we had a job to do regarding people escaping from the East. So I did that job. Let's see, I've been 15 months in the job. Then I came back and I was promoted to Specialist Fourth Class, which is like PFC. And my friend had found out how one could get shipped home in an airplane instead of a ship. And that was arranged for me. And I flew back in an airplane to Fort Dix. Told my parents I was coming. My father missed the plane arrival. Like, they didn't know I was coming that day. Of course they knew, but in his nature, he just couldn't get it organized to go to this air base at Fort Dix and pick me up. So he never showed up, and I then went through all the discharge operations. What was called separation, a procedure, and then I was in reserves for 6 years thereafter. That's why they call it separation. Go from active duty to this reserve status. So I served in that for 6 years, and then I got a discharge.
So during this time period when you were in Europe, or maybe even much later, you can share, did you ever go back to Vienna or
Yes,
Liverpool and London and all of that?
people who were stationed in Berlin got extra leave because you couldn't go anywhere without going through East Germany, because East Germany surrounded Berlin. So I got extra leave, and my friend and I went to Vienna and Venice and Holland, whatever. Forgot the name of the Dutch capital. It's not important.
How did it feel to be back in the country of your birth?
I didn't have feelings. I walked around, looked at the building where we used to live. It didn't get bombed. They just bombed in Vienna the railway yards. They left all the rest of it alone because it was a treasure, all those palaces, and they weren't angry at the Austrians like they were at the Germans, because the Austrians didn't fill planes with bombs and send them over to England. So they kind of left the Austrians alone.
And how did you find your old place that you lived? How did you get that address to know
I had
to
it
go
in my
there?
head. I have it today. And I knew everything.
Did it look the same?
Oh yes, unchanged.
Did they let you go in and look at the...
I didn't go in because the Nazis who took it over were still there. And I didn't go in and knock on the door and identify myself. And my mother said, well, why didn't you go in? I said, I didn't feel like going in.
Did you, by chance, some of your family might have been buried? Did you go in any cemeteries or see any?
Later I did. Earlier I didn't. It was a huge cemetery, and it was just not my thing. And I didn't have a lot of leave time either. So I remember looking at our old apartment house and some other things, and then I left and went back to Berlin.
How about your grandparents' house? Did you go there?
Could be. It's a little old house near the river.
So it must have been interesting being in Berlin with it being, you know, surrounded
Yeah,
by
it was
the-
interesting, and I got to be very good at my job because I had a good college degree, and I knew what the Army was after, and I had certain specialties that I concentrated on, and I got very good at those specialties, which is why I got promoted. I went before a board of 5 officers, and they started asking me questions, and I was able to answer every one. About 25 people went before this board, and 5 got promoted, and I got promoted.
Did your parents ever go back? to Vienna?
Yes, they did. They liked to go to Switzerland, which is next door. And maybe they went to Vienna. I don't know. I didn't live there anymore. So,
Do you, did your parents separate the before and after? Like now we're Americans and and Europe was our. Did they ever? A lot of people talk about life there. Did they talk a lot about their history or their past, or did they embrace America? Or?
if they did, I don't remember.
Okay, all right. So here you are in Atlanta. So you get this degree, you leave the Army. So,
No, you got it backwards.
you went to Cooper Union.
and
then you went-
graduated.
right, then you
joined
went to
the Army.
And then what happened? When I said degree, I meant your undergraduate degree.
Yeah, what did I do? Oh, when I was in Berlin, I had applied to Carnegie Tech for admission, and they gave me an assistantship. So when I got out of the Army, I got through the summer and went to Pittsburgh to Carnegie Tech, where I stayed 4 years.
And then eventually you made your way to Atlanta?
Yeah, my uncle lived here, and he was telling us what a great place it is. And it kind of was at that time.
So, so in terms of, can we pause? I'm going to go back and ask a little background about your mother and her family, if I could.
Sure.
So let's have your mother's name, and and maybe you can. What is your mother's name? Could you spell it, please?
IRMA.
And it's Irma.
Yeah. Mandel, MANDL.
Okay. And how did your parents meet?
They both worked at that insurance company,
Okay, the insurance company's name was.
Phoenix.
And so it's pretty interesting. Your father, did he have a degree? Did your mother have a college degree or anything like that?
My father eventually had a Doctor of Laws degree from the University of Vienna, and it was the late 20s when he graduated. My mother did not have a college degree.
Were there any quotas back then for your father to be able to go to school? Did he ever mention it and say, I was so lucky to get in, or I had this contact from the Army that you mentioned before? Do you know?
I don't know anything about that. I did see his record once. He went to a special high school whose name I forgot, but I think he was the only Jew in the senior class, and they called it Mosaish, is the adjective in force. But they inducted him into the Army anyway. They didn't care.
And Mosaic meant Jewish,
Yes,
like for Moses.
exactly. And he had to bring a horse and a saddle because this was an upper class operation. And so his father had to get a horse and a saddle and a sword and whatever lieutenants needed.
So you shared earlier that your father's parents were in merchandise, a liquor store.
Yes.
Did they have to sell the store when the Nazis came in and invaded? Do you know?
Well, my grandfather died in 1940.
right, the Nazis come a little
and the-
earlier.
The grandmother was running the store, and I was gone. I didn't know what happened.
Right.
We didn't discuss it.
So what did your mother's parents do for a living
They were dead.
by the time? Okay.
Yeah. Before I came along, they were dead. There was a big flu epidemic, 1920, 21.
Yeah, I just.
I never met them.
Okay. So, so in terms of that, did your mother come when they were alive, a Jewish household? Were they observant? Was she observant?
Minimally,
Did you have a kosher home? Because that's,
I doubt it.
and as a family unit, if I asked this before, I apologize, did you all go to synagogue when you were growing up?
No,
In Vienna? Okay.
they were married in the synagogue because I went there and looked at it and knew about it.
Did that synagogue still have any records? Did you ever find any records of their marriage?
I have the record of the Jewish community of Vienna, which kept track of all that stuff. It was not done at the synagogue, but the Jewish community had a headquarters called Israelitische Kultusgemeinde, and I imagine the other religions had these headquarters too, like if there were any Muslims, they had it. And of course the Catholic Church took care of their own because Austria was a Catholic country.
So when you were growing up, were your parents involved in any Jewish organizations, or did they serve on any boards? Did you serve on any organizations or things like that when you were growing up?
I did it here at Sheretz Israel. I did not do it in Vienna because it just wasn't done.
Right. So here you are, you have this whole life before the age of 6 or 7, come to the United States, moved a lot. How did you, when you had children, tell your children your story? At what age did you do that, and how did you tell them?
We told them right along. I don't recall a specific instance of telling them.
Did they ask a lot of questions?
My daughter's 62, and I'm supposed to remember how many questions she asked.
I mean, were they curious? Did they want to see pictures? Did they want to...
I don't know.
Have you ever taken your children back with you? Did you ever go together to visit your birthplace?
My David is going in a couple of weeks, and he wants me to go to Vienna with them, but it's not so easy because there are no direct flights from here to Vienna.
Do you want to go to be with him, or is this like your last hurrah? Like,
Well, I've been to Vienna lots, and he wants me to come, and he's going to spend 3 days in Vienna, and I have to select flights, like through Schiphol, Holland. And it's just a lot of work for me to get to Vienna because you have to change planes somewhere. So,
but how do you feel about going back there again? Is there a certain purpose? Is it to research your roots, or is it
well, I
a
know all
tourist
about
trip?
my roots.
I meant with your son, yeah.
You can't research roots now because of the way they handled the documents. I don't know. I'll have to think. He only asked me yesterday, so
Okay. So, what motivated you or prompted you at this age, you know, to do this interview and tell your story?
I don't know how we got to this stage. Maybe my daughter-in-law, who works for a Jewish agency. Oh, it seemed like the thing to do. And a record is kept, and I can present it to my children, whatever it will be.
And with all that has happened, you know, 85 years ago, right, when you were 6, What do you think of all the headlines and news and anti-Semitism rising today? How does it make you feel?
I'm not surprised because of what happened before. And there's a great impetus pushing anti-Semitism in various quarters. People forget about the death camps. But the Israelis have made friends with Qatar and some of those countries over there, because the countries realized that it's helpful to be a friend of Israel, get the technology, maybe some military help. There are a lot of little Arab states. There are 7 Emirates, and they have some airlines, like there's an Emirates airline, and some of those places are showing interest in Israel, and some aren't. I don't know. That's what I think about. And it wasn't like that years ago because the Emirates didn't exist. In fact, they were called Trucial States of Oman, O-M-A-N, because they were fighting all the time. And there were these little tiny countries, each had a sheikh. And eventually they stopped fighting and built some airports, built an airline.
So for you personally and your family, Judaism is important to you?
Well, I wouldn't be a non-Jew, and I don't eat pork or bacon. Bacon is pork already. Because I was not brought up that way. I think my parents ate ham, but they didn't eat shrimp because the shrimp never made it to Vienna. They didn't fly it in because they just didn't do that. But there was plenty of pork. Let's see, what else could there have been? I don't know.
So I know you also mentioned when we talked about family, your grandchild had an interest in learning more from you?
Well, I have 5 grandchildren, so I don't remember when they ask me stuff.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share in terms of this recording that family members may see in the future, or other people? Anything else you want to share?
No.
Okay. Let's pause. Okay. So here you are. You've talked about maybe going back to Vienna.
Yes.
And I was curious, so you lived in Vienna, and then you also lived in London and that town with the family in Worthing. Can you tell me a little bit more about that family? Did you ever go back?
Yes, I've been back to Worthing, but by that time the family had changed. The old people had died.
Do you remember the name of the family that you stayed with?
Yes, Seacombe, S-E-A-C-O-M-B-E.
And did any of their children still live there? You mentioned they had their own children.
I didn't know the address.
So when you were there, when you went back to Worthing, did it feel vaguely familiar? Did you remember?
Very familiar, because it's a unique place. It has a big beach and beachfront activities, rides and stores and stuff, and it all came back to me.
Could you see yourself as this 6-year-old boy there while you were there, running around? Or?
No, I was more concerned about driving on the left, which is a painful experience.
Did you go to the church that you went to with the family?
No, because I forgot which one we went to.
In terms of
I
that?
remember when we walked in, there was somebody pulling on a bell rope. I thought that was really interesting that they would do that on Sunday morning.
And what motivated you to go back there, to go back to that place and time?
Because we were in England and I had a rental car and I said, let's go to Worthing. I mean, it's a seaside resort and there are bigger and better ones, but this one's okay. Antique stores.
So you've lived so many places. You were in
Yes.
Vienna,
Yes.
you were in Worthing, New Bedford. Did you ever go back to New Bedford?
Yes.
What was that like?
Like nothing.
What motivated you to want to go back and see that part of your life?
I was in the neighborhood, so to speak, so we went through there just to see what memories it might bring. It didn't bring any. I was in Bedford, New Bedford, 7 months, and I was a kid.
And what cities do you remember the most?
Well, Pittsburgh, we lived a long time. Plus, I went to Carnegie Tech. So, and that's where I met my future wife.
So you've lived a lot of places.
And
had
60
to-
years here.
Right, and had a lot of resilience to move and start over your life every single time.
Well, when I moved here, I had a job, and in Pittsburgh, I had graduate school, and they paid me, and I had GI Bill, and they paid me, and it was okay.
So you come to the South in what?
61.
So it's has its own history.
Yes.
Did you experience any of that here in terms of either anti-Semitism or being Jewish or seeing other populations being oppressed? Do you have any memories of that?
I remember when we came, the blacks could not live north of Ponce de Leon. I noticed that. And eventually that color barrier stopped. And Georgia Tech admitted its first black student September 1961. And there was a little bit of a furor about that, but nothing like University of Alabama. And Georgia Tech got through it okay. There was a little bit of something, but nothing to get excited about. And then we had black students at Georgia Tech.
Did you experience any type of remarks about you being Jewish? Were there any experiences you remember living in the South in that time?
Yes, there were remarks, but I think they were meant in a humorous vein. And I don't want to go into what the remarks were or who said them.
Right. Okay. Good. Well, you have shared your story with us for us to know your travels from Vienna to Belgium,
Right.
to London, to Boston, to New Bedford, to
Pittsburgh,
Pittsburgh, New York, Atlanta,
West Berlin.
West Berlin.
Yes, I've been around.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing your story with us today. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, I think we covered everything.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
doing this. Herbert, what is this a picture of?
Our basic training class at Fort Dix, New Jersey. It gives a date July 20th, 1954. I think I had been in the Army 4 days, and we were told to assemble and get our picture taken. And because we all look kind of alike, I have marked my image.
And you met people from all over the country?
No, this was First Army, And First Army is Maine, Massachusetts, New York State, maybe New Jersey. And then the country at that time was divided into army units, so this was First Army. And then there was Second, which was Georgia, etc. And so on to the West Coast. And each place had its army, and this was Army, First Army. And then we wore a patch somewhere showing First Army, or 69th Infantry Division, which was housed at Fort Dix, New Jersey.
So, Herbert, can you tell us what this picture is again?
The third or fourth day in the Army, they take group pictures, and this is the group I was in, and we posed, and that's the resulting picture. And since we all look alike, I marked it with a triangle.
There's a African-American man there.
Yes, he is the sergeant who supervised us, and maybe you can see his stripes on the sleeve. No, I don't see anything, but I know he was the sergeant.
And how old were you?
21.
Thank you.